couple of weeks ago, I preached at First Unitarian Church in Philadelphia, and their choir is pretty good. Wow, it's just beautiful, just beautiful. Today, being the first Sunday of Advent on the Christian calendar, I want to offer you two perspectives on this season. The first is from the 16th century Spanish mystic San Juan de la Cruz, or St. John of the Cross. He wrote, "If you want, the Virgin will come walking down the road, pregnant with the Holy, and say, 'I need shelter for the night. Please take me inside your heart. My time is so close.' Then, under the roof of your soul, you will witness the sublime intimacy, the divine, the Christ, taking birth forever as she grabs your hand for help. For each of us is the midwife of God, each of us. Yes, under the dome of your being does creation come into existence eternally. Through your womb, dear pilgrim, the sacred womb in your soul, as God grabs our arms for help. For each of us is God's beloved servant, never far." Our second perspective on Advent is offered from a contemporary British Unitarian minister, Simon John Barlow, who writes, "Prepare the way to welcome your inner Christ child, that being of love and light, the spark of holiness that lies deep in us all. Seek the signs of hope and promise in your life and the world around you, the stars that point the way to the light of God. Make your way to the stable of peace and acceptance in the secret depths of your heart. Prepare a manger in your heart, built from the wood of your life, your body, your home, your physical comforts. Line it with the straw from your life, your loves and friendships, your memories, your harvest of sweet and bitter remembrances. Bring your life's gifts to your inner Christ child, your thankfulness, your contentments, your hopes, your experiences of growth. Surround your manger with your joys, your loves, the beauties of your life, with those you know and have known, with the light of lights." Two different perspectives from two different times and two different cultures, yet strikingly similar. I had the exquisite experience this week of being in the midst of a community of hope. People there were chatting excitedly about the future. They talked about possibility and potential. They didn't seem to be burdened at all by whatever ills befell them in the present. There was lightness and laughter all around me, and I couldn't help but feel buoyed by their shared sense of excitement and anticipation. It was truly infectious, and I couldn't resist joining them. Now, I'd like to say that where I was at the time was in our coffee hour after service, but it wasn't. Or maybe during a meeting of our board or lay leadership council, but that wasn't it either. And it wasn't even yesterday in the meeting that Martis talked about, where there were 80 of us together, all being very hopeful and not despairing about the future, working towards justice. But that wasn't it either. It was waiting in line to buy a Powerball ticket. There is not, I'm afraid to say, not a more hopeful, happy place in America today than in the line waiting to buy a ticket where you could win $500 million. People were sharing their hopes and dreams openly with each other, complete strangers. You didn't even have to ask the question, what would you do if you won? People were just talking to each other. I'd buy a yacht I'd take a trip around the world. I'd set up an educational trust for my children and grandchildren. You heard all of these hopes and dreams. And I will admit to you that Irene and I have played this what if we won game for years as we dabbled in the lottery when we deemed the jackpot worthy of our small contribution. I'm not going to stand here and advocate that you buy lottery tickets as a spiritual practice. I know that the lottery is a form of regressive tax, one that hits those who can least afford it the hardest. But I do think that playing the lottery from time to time can help lift us out of our doldrums. The gift of the lottery for all of us, except those very few winners, is the gift of hope, of anticipation, of excitement. Fleeting though it may be, a lottery ticket reminds us of what it's like to dream unrestrained. So as long as the lottery isn't the primary component of your retirement plan, and you play responsibly, as they say in the commercials, perhaps buying a quick pick now and then isn't a terrible idea. It is to me a strange coincidence that one of the largest lottery jackpots in history arrived close to the start of the Christian season of Advent. Advent is a time of preparation and waiting. It's a time of anxious anticipation, a time of dreaming of what is to come. In its most literal, it's the time before the birth of the Christ child, when we are called to, as the carol tells us, prepare him room. As one author put it, Advent is, quote, a time of waiting for a hoped-for future, waiting for the time of bleakness to pass and the new joy to arrive. And when you think about it that way, Advent and the lottery can be seen as parallel seasons and practices. But Advent, of course, is not about waiting for wealth to descend upon us from the heavens. Nor for many of us is this a time when we anxiously prepare for the arrival of the Christ child. Yes, we anticipate the arrival of Christmas, that both sacred and secular holiday celebrated by many of us. We string up lights, we put up a tree, and we shop for gifts for the ones we love. For most of us, though, it's not really a season of patient waiting, is it? Patient waiting. Far from it. It can be downright frenetic for too many of us. So today, in this time that we're together, for the next few moments, I just invite you into this place of waiting, of patience. I invite you to relax and to breathe and to call to mind the sweetness of anticipation, to remember what it's like to wait patiently for your future to arrive. Anticipation and expectation are beautiful, pure emotions. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking back to the time when I was a youngster and the days leading up to my birthday. Think about how, when you were a child, you looked forward to that day, to your birthday. That day that was made just for you, when you were the center of attention. A day when you would be given gifts by your parents or your friends. When a cake, a blazing inferno was set before you. And everyone was singing and wishing you nothing but happiness. Those days leading up to your birthday were exquisite, weren't they? I'll just add here that mine is coming in 2 days. And the truth is that in many ways the anticipation, the expectation can be better than the reality itself, right? Because maybe on your birthday you didn't quite get a gift you were hoping for, or maybe your mom didn't have time to bake you a cake and she stopped at the supermarket and grabbed one on the run. I remember one birthday of mine in particular where the celebration was pretty miserable because I made it miserable. I had a terrible birthday, even though I was hoping for a good one. Come to find out about 2 days later, I broke out in measles, so I had an excuse, but we didn't know that at the time. So here's the thing about anticipation and expectation. Sometimes they surpass the reality. They surpass the reality. Reality can sometimes not live up to our fantasies, which in fact is why we call them fantasies, right? But sometimes that can be a bitter pill to swallow. What makes anticipation so sweet is that in our dreams we can create a hoped-for reality that may or may not be realized. There was a second experience of mine that I was thinking about as I was writing the sermon, and it was several years ago when I began to dream of owning a motorcycle. I dream of the rides that I would take through the New England countryside on a beautiful fall day, of the feelings of freedom that I would have riding. I don't know if many of you remember that show from a long time ago on TV called Then Came Bronson. I had this vision of just strapping a sleeping bag to my bike and taking off and going on, see, you remember, just going on some adventure with no itinerary, no destination. That's the anticipation, the expectation, the dream that I conjured in my mind. And as luck would have it, I came across a motorcycle for sale on the side of the road. And after some negotiations, first with Irene, and then with the seller, I bought the motorcycle. And I rode it a little. I rode it back and forth to work a couple of times, and I took a couple of Saturday rides. But mostly, the bike sat in the garage gathering dust. I quickly came to realize that a solitary pursuit, as I had envisioned, doesn't fit really well with the responsibilities of being the father of a young family. And I held on to that bike, and I held on to those dreams for about 10 years. And I think I put about 1,000 miles on the motorcycle in that 10 years, which is not much. And finally I sold it and let go of both the bike and the dream. And so here was another case where the anticipation, the expectation was so beautiful, so powerful, and yet the reality didn't quite live up to it. What will it be like when I leave home for the first time? What will my wedding day be like? What will it be like in my new job? I wonder if my child will grow up to be a doctor or a writer or a peacemaker. What does the future hold? These questions and all the ones like it that we face in our lives call us to anticipate, to expect, to dream. Our very ability to consider the question, what will my life be like if, and then fill in the blank, our ability to face that question is one of the defining characteristics of our humanity and our consciousness. Many of us are good at dreaming, at hoping, at planning, and perhaps even at executing those plans to make our dreams become a reality. But what we're not so good at is the waiting part. The waiting part, the patience part. You heard in the first hymn this morning, the first chorus this morning, "Come, Savior, quickly come." Even in our song, "Come quickly," we sing. We don't want to have to wait for our dreams to come true. And I wonder how many of us would buy a lottery ticket if the lottery, instead of in the next 2 or 3 days, was weeks or months or even a year away. This time of year, with the days at their shortest and of course the nights at their longest, we are invited to wait, to sit in the darkness of the world, of our spirits, waiting for the light to return, for the light of the world to be reborn. There's a beautiful poem that I found by the poet Macrina Widecker. It's called "The Sacrament of Waiting," and I want to share it with you. Slowly, she celebrated the sacrament of letting go. First, she surrendered her green, then the orange, yellow, and red. Finally, she let go of her brown. Shedding her last leaf, she stood empty and silent, stripped bare. Leaning against the winter sky, she began her vigil of trust. Shedding her last leaf, she watched it journey to the ground. She stood in silence, wearing the color of emptiness, her branches wondering, how do you give shade with so much gone? And then the sacrament of waiting began. The sunrise and sunset watched with tenderness, clothing her with silhouettes. They kept her hope alive. They helped her understand that her vulnerability, her dependence and need, her emptiness, her readiness to receive were giving her a new kind of beauty. Every morning and every evening, they stood in silence and celebrated together the sacrament of waiting. This poem, I think, offers some helpful hints about how we might wait, how we might sit in the darkness waiting for the light, how we might give ourselves over to our dreams and not force their arrival too soon. Notice that the first thing the tree does is to let go and to stand silent. Shedding its leaves, the tree lays itself bare and opens itself to possibility. The Christian theologian Paul Tillich tells us that there are two kinds of waiting. The first one is the passive waiting in laziness, but the second is the receiving waiting in openness. This is the waiting that the poet describes. Waiting in openness, Tillich says, demands patience, and patience demands stillness within oneself. And so, in this season of Advent, amidst all the hustle and bustle, it is countercultural to be still inside ourselves. You'll notice, too, in the poem that waiting is not a solitary pursuit. The poem tells us that the tree is joined by the sunrise and the sunset, who watch with tenderness. They clothe her with silhouettes that keep her hope alive. They help her to understand her vulnerability and her dependence, her need. We need partners, collaborators in our waiting. We need them to remind us of who we are and who we yet can become. To walk with us in our waiting, coaxing forth our emptiness, our vulnerability, our readiness and willingness to accept what the future holds. In the Bible story, from whence Advent comes, when Mary is pregnant with the baby Jesus, she is not alone. Her good friend Elizabeth, her companion, walks the path with her, helping her to keep hope alive. And together, Mary and Elizabeth celebrated the sacrament of waiting. Waiting, the poet tells us, is something to be cherished and celebrated, not to be tolerated. And here's the rub. Here's the rub for me. Because I think there is a real tension between the sweetness of anticipation and the sacrament of waiting. When we hope and we dream, our focus is on the future. We are living in that moment for the not yet, for what is to become. But at the same time, the waiting calls for us to be present with what we have now, with who we are now, and to face the uncertainties of the now. The now deceased Unitarian minister Roy Phillips used to tell of a cartoon that he saw. The cartoon shows two men wearing sandwich boards, and they're walking along a downtown sidewalk, approaching each other. One of them wears a sign that says, "Jesus is coming." The other sandwich board says, "Buddha here now." Jesus is coming, Buddha here now. And that, I think, sums up the tension that I'm talking about. Our faith calls us to live fully in the present, in all its beauty and all its tragedy. And at the same time, we are called to be ever hopeful of a better future. As mundane as this sounds, the essence of this dual reality that we live in is captured, I think, beautifully in that old Heinz ketchup commercial. Do you remember that one where the child tilts the bottle of ketchup up and is waiting and waiting for that sweet, gooey goodness to come out? And Carly Simon sings the song Anticipation. It's corny, but I think it's true. We know how good that ketchup is going to be when it gets to the hamburger, but we have to be patient and wait it out. The active waiting that Paul Tillich describes, that receiving waiting in openness, asks us to be both intimately connected to the here and now, appreciating fully what we have in our current state, and at the same time to be fully expectant of what is to come. It's a tricky balancing act. It's like having one foot on the dock and one foot in the canoe, really, isn't it? Our task during this time of year and perhaps all year long is to embrace the both and of our existence, to expectantly anticipate our futures, that which is to come, while we also live fully and faithfully in the present tense, embracing the darkness with this passionate patience. Our hopes and our dreams are in the process of becoming true, and our lives as they are precious and powerful, and we must always be present to them. Jesus is coming. Buddha here now. That is the truth of our lives. May it always be so. This day and every day. I wish you peace. Amen.
Our closing words today are by the 14th century mystic, Fra Giovanni. I salute you. There is nothing I can give you which you do not have. But there is much that while I cannot give, you can take. No heaven can come to us unless our hearts find rest in it today. Take heaven. No peace lies in the future which is not hidden in this present instant. Take peace. The gloom of the world is but a shadow. Behind it, yet within our reach, is joy. Take joy. Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, Come Thou Font of Every Blessing, number 126 in your gray hymn.